The Trump administration says 20 million Americans will get a COVID vaccine by the end of the year. But how will those doses be delivered to rural communities? One company is testing out drones as a possible solution. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is in Wilson, North Carolina. Dasha, I can hear them. How do these drones work, and how could they potentially help distribute a COVID vaccine, particularly in rural parts of the country?
Hey, Allison. Well, when civilians like you and me think about drones, we probably think of them as either toys or as nuisances. But let me tell you, this is not your teenage nephew's toy drone. This is a Volley C-10. This is a drone that can travel it's at 60 miles per hour. It has a range of about 50 miles, and it can carry 10 pounds of cargo. And this is a demo we're doing just for you here. But this drone has been taking vaccines and medical supplies from Merck's pharmaceutical finishing facility here in Wilson, North Carolina, and bringing it right here to Vidant Healthplex, a hospital here in this rural part of the state. You can see one of the key pieces of this technology is what you just saw there when the drone landed. That's called soft touch delivery. It can, instead of dropping that cargo box or sending it down in a parachute the way other drones might, it can set it down gently so that any of those precious materials in there, those materials will be safe. That cargo box there can also store vaccines at minus 80 degrees Celsius, which is a really important piece of this technology as well. What they're doing here, this project is largely a test to see how this technology works, what needs to be improved, and to see if they can really scale this to be used in other use cases like distribution of the COVID vaccine. Allison?
Yeah, Dasha, you mentioned that temperature issue. That Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored at negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also stored in glass vials. Can those drones handle all of the logistical challenges of this particular vaccine? It sounds at least like they've got the temperature issue down.
Yeah, they've got the temperature issue down. They've got that soft touch landing down. And this is actually key for rural communities because we've talked so much about how some of these smaller hospitals in more remote areas, they might not have the capability for ultra cold storage. They can't have massive inventory on hand. Well, because this drone is capable of delivering vaccines at those cold temperatures, and you can see the cargo box here, it doesn't it's not going to bring hundreds and hundreds of vials, but it can bring a smaller supply, which is actually what some of these facilities might need. They might not be able to keep those larger numbers on dry ice, replenishing that dry ice in their facilities. They might not be able to vaccinate enough people before those vaccines expire, which is a key issue. I want you to hear from the Chief Technology Officer about some more of the details of this technology. Let's take a listen.
Our Volley C-10 can take off and land vertically like a helicopter. We deliver the package softly, we land, unload the cargo, and the package just sits there. So some of these vaccines, they come in glass vials, and they will not break. It's like handing you a package, basically. That's exactly how the delivery works. It's also temperature controlled, so this ensures that the cold chain for these medicines is maintained along its entire route.
But Allison, here's a little bit of a reality check. There are still challenges, and this is not a solution that makes sense everywhere. It could be helpful for rural communities, but even for that, there are regulatory limitations that won't allow this to scale in the way that the vision for the company hopes it will. That might be 2 or 3 years away. In the short term, though, there are use cases for this that as people have to get more creative, especially in these more remote communities, this could be one piece of that puzzle, Allison.
Dasha, you said it at the start. Normally I see or I hear a drone and I'm annoyed and I'm wondering why it's flying around and what are they doing. But this is definitely a very cool potential use of a drone. I'm into this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. We are starting this hour with the pandemic hitting new highs once again. The U.S. reporting a record 222,000 new cases yesterday, according to our own NBC News data. Total infections are now topping 15.3 million. That means roughly 1 in 22 Americans have been diagnosed with this virus. There are also over 104,000 Americans currently in the hospital with COVID. That's another all-time high, according to the COVID Tracking Project. These skyrocketing numbers are leaving a lot of people wondering, when will we get a vaccine? HHS Secretary Alex Azar giving an update today.
We believe that we will have 40 million doses by the end of December to be able to vaccinate 20 million people. You hold back half of that because they're 2-dose regimens, and we make sure we have that there to distribute. January, as I said, we think by the end of January up to about 50 million people that will have had first dose vaccination.
The FDA is expected to approve Pfizer's vaccine tomorrow. Doses of that vaccine could be distributed this Friday. Healthcare workers in long-term care facilities are first in line, but it could be months before America is fully protected. Now, as we said, the FDA has not approved Pfizer's vaccine yet, but that is not stopping Louisiana from getting ready to distribute it. Once the state gets the green light, it expects a first batch of about 79,000 doses. And Louisiana's Governor John Bel Edwards says the state will administer every single one within 48 hours. That is pretty impressive. NBC News reporter Valerie Castro joining me now from Shreveport, Louisiana. Valerie, every single dose in arms in just 48 hours. How does the state plan to pull that off?
Well, Allison, the state plans to pull that off with the help of this company. This is Morris and Dixon, this warehouse that we're standing in, and they have been tasked with helping deliver this vaccine to all parts of the state. Larger hospital systems will get their shipments directly because they can handle them, but Morris and Dixon is going to act as a middleman to make sure it gets to those rural communities, those smaller pharmacies. I spoke to the Vice President of Operations earlier today about how they plan to do that, and take a listen to what he had to say.
Where it may differ from other states, where some states are sending an entire pizza box, as they call it, straight to a facility, and they're going to get 195 vials or 975 doses, and that's the one quantity they're going to get. What we're doing differently with the state of Louisiana is breaking that down into smaller quantities so that we can give 25 doses, 50 doses, 75 doses to smaller, so that we can reach these underserved communities and smaller clinics rather than everything going to large health systems.
So they're really trying to break it down into those smaller packages. They want to make sure nothing goes to waste. Allison?
You saw a practice run of the repackaging process today. Tell us more about it. Why do the vaccines need to be repackaged, and how will all that work?
Well, as we were just talking about, those smaller facilities really don't have the equipment, the storage to have larger doses of vaccine on hand. They really need those smaller shipments because they need to remain cold. So they were doing practice runs here earlier today, transferring the vials from a larger shipment to a smaller shipment, and they really have to be careful about it, but they really have to move fast because it has to stay cold. It has to stay ultra cold. So they only have about 3 minutes to handle this vaccine. That's what they were practicing earlier today. Once they get it into those smaller packages, those foam packages, they will then put it into coolers that have been fitted with temperature gauges or thermometers. That way they can monitor the packages once they get sent out to these different facilities to ensure that they get there in the condition that they're needed.
Right now, those vaccines aren't on site. How soon after the FDA approval does the company expect to have them on hand and ready to go?
Right. So we're hoping that there will be approval by the FDA tomorrow. That is the plan, the hope. And the state officials are telling us that they are hoping that they'll start to see it sometime early next week. Allison?
All right. Valerie Castro in Shreveport, Louisiana. Thank you. As we've been saying, by this time tomorrow, the Pfizer COVID vaccine could have emergency use authorization from the FDA, but we still have a long way to go in fighting this pandemic. 1 in 22 Americans has tested positive for the coronavirus. That's more than 15 million people. And over in the UK, they're investigating a potential problem with the Pfizer vaccine. Regulators there are looking into 2 adverse reactions that happened on day 1 of the country's COVID vaccination program. Right now, the UK is warning people with significant allergies not to get the vaccine until that investigation is over. Joining me now, Dr. Richard Besser. He is the former acting CDC director and the CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Besser, we always love having you on, but especially on an important day like this. People might see that headline in the UK about possible adverse reactions to the Pfizer vaccine and be scared off. So I would appreciate if you would level with them. How concerned should our viewers be about this kind of news? How should we handle this?
Well, it's a good sign, Allison, that the UK regulators are saying, let's take a pause on people who've had severe allergic reactions in their lives, people who have to carry those adrenaline pens, those EpiPens with them. Take a pause while they investigate. There are other vaccines where people who've had severe allergic reactions to vaccines or medications or food are treated differently. So they're given vaccines in a special setting so that if they have reactions, doctors can administer medicine to help control that. And that may be the case here. I would expect that when these trials were done, they didn't include people in those trials who had a history of severe allergic reactions. So as the vaccine is now moved into a larger population, they may start to see things. But I would expect tomorrow when the FDA meets, this will be one of the things, one of the questions that's raised up, and it may be something that they take into consideration when they give guidance to states about how to roll this out.
Dr. Besser, I have to ask, because you know much more about this than I certainly do. Were you surprised when we heard about a potential adverse reaction like this to get that kind of news? Or is this something that you typically see when vaccines roll out?
I'm not surprised, but it's one of the reasons that you have to pay really close attention as you're moving from a very controlled, drug trial to using something in the general population. When I looked at the data that FDA posted on their website yesterday, it's really pretty incredible. It's incredible how effective this vaccine is and how little they saw in the way of side effects. But again, it's in a controlled group. A lot of people with sore arms, a lot of people who felt pretty beat and lethargic after the second dose. But that's their body reacting and building that immune response. But what it really means is that as this goes forward, the systems for monitoring that FDA and CDC have for looking at adverse events, adverse side effects, becomes really, really important. We only have 2 months of safety data ahead of these evaluations by FDA, and that's a short period of time. And so the ongoing evaluation will be really, really key to people trusting this and for us learning whether or not there are any issues.
How about for folks specifically who have these types of allergies? I've got several friends, coworkers who walk around with EpiPens. What if they are sitting here thinking, oh my God, am I not going to be able to get a coronavirus vaccine? Is this going to affect my life long term? Because I'm not going to be able to go back to normal potentially like everybody else. What do you say to calm folks like that?
Yeah, I would say, I understand why you're concerned. Hearing those headlines, it would be hard not to be concerned. Yeah. But let's wait and see how the investigation plays out. What I expect that will come out of the UK is that they'll look at this, and if they feel there's a concern, what they would say is that people who've had those reactions need to receive their vaccine in a very controlled medical setting. So if they have a side effect, it can be handled. I would be very surprised if they say, sorry, those people who have allergies. Allergies are really common, and severe food allergies are on the rise. So I would be very surprised if in the end they say, sorry, you're not going to get access to this. What they would do is say, how do we do it safely and securely for you too?
Dr. Besser, Operation Warp Speed, laying the groundwork for distributing the Pfizer vaccine if it gets emergency use authorization tomorrow. Here's General Gus Perna.
Our goal is to make sure that we can ensure the vaccine is delivered in a timely manner, it's delivered safely, securely, and it's ready to be utilized to start administering vaccine as soon as possible. To that end, what we also already did, I gave permission to already distribute syringes and needles, alcohol wipes, and diluent, which is required in support of the Pfizer vaccine. We'll begin that today. It'll be distribution will be completed by Friday.
Dr. Besser, what are your biggest distribution questions and concerns tonight?
Well, there are several. One is, are states ready to be able to handle a vaccine that has to be kept at such cold temperatures? They've known this is coming, and so I expect that they will. One of the biggest, though, for me is, Allison, as we've talked about so many times, this pandemic is not hitting all communities in the same way. Black, Latino, Native Americans have been hit extremely hard, and not all states have clearly defined in their plans how they're ensuring that vaccines will get to all healthcare facilities and will get to all long-term care facilities, and in particular, that it will be getting to communities to healthcare facilities that serve the communities that have been hit the hardest. We know across our history that healthcare facilities in more well-to-do communities have been resourced better than others, and we can't allow for that to happen in this pandemic when we look at such a disparate impact that we've seen to date.
Can we talk about that a little bit more, Dr. Besser? Because a recent study from the Journal of the American Medical Association found something that we do know, right? That Black and Hispanic patients were more likely to test positive for COVID. But they also found that they had lower mortality after hospitalization, suggesting that neighborhood characteristics could be to blame. Could you explain that a little bit more for our viewers, and how else we should just be taking that into account, not only just in distributing the COVID vaccine to communities of color, but being sure that these communities are comfortable getting a vaccine, and that we don't follow some of the patterns in this country, the bad patterns that we have set when it comes to healthcare in the past?
Yeah, I mean, this is a useful study. There have been other studies as well, and some studies have found actually higher mortality rates after hospitalization. So you have to look at the totality of the literature. But what is absolutely clear is that the biggest issue for Black, Latino, Native Americans, for lower income Americans, is an increased risk of exposure. And when you think about that, when you think about who is able to work from home and who must go out to work in order to earn an income, that is not distributed evenly across our country. And if you're in a situation where you have to be out to do your work, whether you're a frontline healthcare worker or someone working in food production or delivery or transportation, there's so many different jobs where you cannot do them remotely. You are at increased risk, and that is one of the biggest drivers of the difference we're seeing by race in America. And it points to the importance that, although everyone is very excited about vaccines coming and the potential, that's not what's going to get us through this winter. What's going to get us through this winter is coming together as a nation and doubling down on wearing masks and keeping socially distant and washing our hands, and Congress finally getting off the ball and coming together and providing support for people so that anyone in America who doesn't feel well or thinks they were exposed has the opportunity to stay home and stay away from other people, so that people aren't forced to go to work to pay the rent and put food on the table. It is absolutely unconscionable that Congress has let so many months go by while so many people in this country, especially people of color, are suffering from the economic downturn and are suffering from the pandemic. And if that doesn't change, through this winter, we're going to see the same communities get hit the hardest, and that should be unacceptable.
Dr. Besser, you bring up something I think about every day, every time I sit here and talk to you, that it is a privilege to be able to work from my home, to interview people like you from my home, a privilege that a lot of people in this country don't have, and we need to get them help, and we need to make sure that they are protected and safe. Thank you so much for always bringing us your medical expertise, your advice, your wisdom. We are really grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you, Allison. I really appreciate it.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.